Yo guys, what is up? Moxie here with a Borderlands 4 video, and today we've got our first ever Borderlands 4 Theorycrafted build, this time for Vex, in a build that I'm dubbing Bloody Reaper. Now, before we dive into this is just for fun. This isn't like anything serious. I'm not saying that this is going to be like the best build for Vex or anything like that. I just love theory crafting. If you didn't know, it's actually how I got into the Borderlands 3 space. I started content creation 3 days after Borderlands came out, but before that, I was an active member of a small little subreddit called r/Borderlands builds, where Gearbox put out the skill tree planners like a month before, and I was really like deep diving every day into like theory crafting builds for all the Vault Hunters, mainly because I didn't know who I wanted to play, so I wanted to come up with a build that I wanted to play, and I ended up finding that build on Amara, and then I followed through with that build to launch. And I posted the video of my theory crafted build that came to fruition, and it ended up, if you go to r/Borderlands builds, it ended up being the top upvoted post of all time, and it's kind of what launched my like whole YouTube career, to be honest. And so I kind of wanted to just start showing off some theory crafted builds. Let me know if you guys like this kind of stuff. It's definitely like, a little weird to be thinking about builds before launch, but it is just what I enjoy. So I hope you guys enjoy the deep dive. Hope you learn a little bit about build crafting and also some interesting things that we're gonna be able to do on Vex. With that, let's get right into it. So in order to understand this build, you have to understand the skill Bloodletter, because the entire build is focused around this skill. This skill reads on Vex in her green tree, gun and skill critical hits have a chance to apply bleed, causing kinetic status effect damage over time for a duration. Bleed is affected by status effect application chance and is considered a status effect. So this is rank 5 out of 5 on max roll right now. It's not updating. So every point that you put into this is going to increase the percentage of the gun damage that it does per second. At max stacks, it's 45% of your gun damage per second as a dot, but that dot can stack up to 20 times. And if we do 45 times 20, that is 900% of our gun damage per second, right? However, stacks, we lose them at 4 seconds, and we can only apply stacks if we crit, and then that crit needs to have a chance to proc a bleed. So we need both crit chance and we need status effect to be able to stack this up as much as possible, and that is going to be the goal of this like overall build. Now, the bleed is in the green tree, and it's a kinetic status effect, and there's all of these things in this tree that like increase your gun damage or increase your like damage with kinetic. For example, Vex gains bonus kinetic damage with her guns based on her lifesteal. You can basically buff up a ton of different kinetic damage that you deal. However, I am not currently sure if that actually affects bleed, which is interesting. And I got to mess around with this a little bit, but how I currently think this works, and once again, this is kind of why it's a theory craft, and it's not set in stone, don't know this for sure, but how I believe this works is it's just basically grabbing your weapon's card damage and dealing that damage as a dot over time, right? Because, for example, if you proc it with a skill critical hit, that skill critical hit still does percentage gun damage, or it's not dealing gun damage, it's dealing status effect damage, but it's based off of your gun, meaning that this is not affected by the damage dealt to proc it. As in, if you proc it with a pebble throw, it's going to deal the same amount of damage as if you proc it with a rocket launcher shot. It is not taking into account the amount of damage that procced it, right? So, for example, dealing more gun damage to proc it and buffing up all of our gun damage is not actually, in theory, going to make this deal any more damage, because the damage that is dealt to this, or the damage that's dealt to proc this, doesn't actually increase the damage of the bleed. So our big goal is to be proccing the bleeds as often as possible. And that's kind of why I want to make this video, is because when I was first theory crafting this, and the first build that I made that's posted on Maxroll was doing exactly that. I was buffing up my gun damage a bunch. I was going blood is power. I was grabbing a bunch of the lifesteal stuff, and I was thinking that that would be really good. And it still could be really good, but the build that I've come up with here mainly focuses on applying this bleed as often as possible, so we're getting that guaranteed max stacks as often as possible on as many enemies as possible, and that is where we're going to bring in Dead Ringer. Now, Dead Ringer is a action skill that gives us a minion that is either a Spectre or a Reaper. The Reapers chase enemies down and deal melee damage. The Spectres stay in place and shoot a gun. Now, the goal of this build is to have these Reapers and these Spectres basically proccing a ton of different status effects and bleed and damage, and that's kind of where we're going to be able to get so many stacks, is because we're going to be shooting our gun, which is going to be proccing bleeds on enemies, but the minions are also going to be meleeing and also going to be shooting weapons to also proc bleeds, and so we're going to have basically everything bleeding all the time. That is going to be the goal. So in the Dead Ringer tree, we're going to start with Cold Iron. Vex and her minions gain increased gun damage. This is just, in terms of this, like, I don't know for a fact if percentage gun damage increases would increase the dot status effect. So if it does, that's great. This is a great pick. If it doesn't, still more gun damage. It's going to be a large portion of our damage. Then we get down to Portents of Suffering. Vex and her minions gain increased status effect damage. This will 100% affect bleed. This is, a must-have. It's 30% more bleed damage. Then we go Blood Sacrifice. Kill skills are triggered when Vex's minions die. We're not really picking many kill skills, so not like super important, but just like 1 pointer is pretty easy. Then we're also going to grab Cursed Blades. Vex's melee attacks apply curse to hit enemies, making them take kinetic status effect damage anytime they take gun damage. This is going to be another way to proccing all of our like status effects on enemies. And then extra cursed damage now triggers on minion melee damage and deals increased damage when it's triggered by a critical hit. Cursed damage on critical hit plus 200%. So we're going to have those Reapers, which are dealing melee damage, proccing cursed damage on enemies, which whenever an enemy that is cursed is going to get damaged by a kinetic status effect, or whenever they take gun damage, they're going to get procced with kinetic status effect damage, aka bleed. And then we get down into the left tree where things get really interesting. We're going to put 1 point into Blight Attunement. This is a kill skill, but it basically says attune kill skill when Vex is attuned to corrosive. Killing an enemy creates a haunting remnant minion for a duration that seeks out nearby enemies, dealing corrosive status effect damage over time. Kill skill restores haunting remnant's duration. Basically, we're just having this to have more status effects going around as another way for status effects to be proccing, because we're not going to be focusing on corrosive. And then with that, we're grabbing Prismatic Ichor. When Vex or her minions apply a status effect, apply another random elemental status effect. Now, anytime that we proc a bleed, we're also going to proc a random status effect. So while an enemy is going to be bleeding, now all of a sudden they're getting burned, they're getting shocked, they're getting cryoed. It's going to, one, up our damage a ton, because now we've got a ton of extra status effects, but it's also going to provide us a bit of utility, freezing, shocking, electrocuting, corroding, all these different types of enemies, because we're mainly going to be using kinetic damage. Then the real kicker, Keen Suffering. Status effect damage gains a chance to critically hit. Critical hit chance, this is going to go 15% crit chance for our status effects, meaning that, because we're mainly getting a lot of our damage from status effects, the ability for them to crit is massive. Now, we don't actually need to put any more points in Necrosis, which gains increased corrosive damage and corrosive status effect damage. We're not really focusing on corrosive damage here. However, that does unlock the Capstone Heirloom. You only need to put 5 points here, and it still unlocks the Capstone. You don't actually need to put 5 out of 5 points into the year. So this gives us Heirloom. Spectres gain a copy of Vex's current equipped gun for a duration. Only one Spectre can have a copied gun at a time, and spawning a new Spectre will remove the copied gun from the previous Spectre. So the strat with this is we get 3 minions, right? We're going to always have one Spectre that's going to have a copy of our gun, and then we're going to use 2 Reapers, and those Reapers are going to be doing the curse application for us, which is going to be very, very nice. But the big thing is, in my head, I'm picturing us using a times 25 Jacobs shotgun with a bunch of base damage. Shotguns, have a ton of base damage. They're going to give us a lot of that damage from the bleed, and they fire a bunch of pellets, which should give us a lot of chance to proc bleeds. And then we can get a Spectre that's also using a 25 pellet Jacobs shotgun, who's also, spraying and proccing a ton of these bleeds, because now we'll get to the skill critical hits in a second, but these should be dealing gun damage, but also counting as skill damage, I believe, if they're being procced from a skill. So we'll see about that. But potentially could be proccing like double bleeds. We'll see. Burning Augment, attuned skill. While Vex is attuned to Incendiary, Vex and her minions gain critical hit damage and status effect application chance. Effects persist for a duration after her attunement is switched. So this is like kind of the interesting thing. Attunement on Vex is something that whenever you like, well, with her capstone, Phase Covenant, Vex is attuned to the element type of her current gun, converting all action skill and melee damage into that type. When you, for example, proc like an action skill or a Spectre or a Reaper on fire damage, it's going to be fire damage, but you're going to get attuned to fire for a duration after you're done casting it. So like you stay attuned to fire, and so we'll probably be able to like, I'm hoping, like attuned to corrosive, attuned to fire, and proc our minions, and then swap to our Jacob's shotgun. That's kind of my goal. We don't actually need to be attuned to kinetic to be able to proc bleeds. Bleed just does kinetic damage, but we don't actually need to be attuned to it to like benefit from it. So this is going to give us a bunch of more crit damage whenever we're attuned to fire, which is massive because now our bleeds are going to be procking, and it's going to give us a bunch of increased status application chance. This is the big kicker. This should, in my head, get us to about 55% chance whenever we crit to proc a bleed, which is just going to make them way more consistent. So that's why we're going for this point, why we're going to want to make sure we're attuning to fire. If like attuning to fire and attuning to corrosive is too much of a pain in the butt, we'd probably just lose this 1 point in a blight attunement. Not that big of a deal. And then we get to our other tree. Let's finish up Dead Ringer. So in our capstone, our Spectre is going to have a copy of our gun, and then the other thing we're going to be using is Wither. Minion skill. Spectres cast Wither on an enemy when they spawn, dealing status effect damage over time and increasing damage taken for a duration. Kill skill. Killing a withered enemy allows Spectres to use Wither again. So whenever our, if our Reapers die, for example, kill skills are triggered whenever Vex's minion dies. That means our Spectre is going to be able to keep applying Withered, and Withered is a 30% damage taken increase. So for like single targets, they're just going to be taking 30% more damage from all of our damage, and primarily taking more damage from bleed. We want that bleed to be really proccing and ticking on things. And then in our incarnate skill tree, we're going to use Grave Sights, kill skill. Vex gains increased critical hit damage and weapon handling. Once again, I don't think this crit damage is going to actually increase the damage that are like if the shot is procced. If we shoot a shot and it procs a bleed and that shot crits, that's not going to increase the bleed damage, but the actual crit damage increase, now that our dots can crit, is going to be a significant damage increase. So this gives us just a bunch more crit damage, specifically for the bleeds. And then, obviously, 5 out of 5 points into Bloodletter. This is what the build is revolving around. And then we go over and grab Target Prescience. Vex's gun damage gains critical hit chance against any part of enemies. If we're using a shotgun, firing a bunch of pellets, if we don't hit them entirely, like in the head, any of those pellets can also crit and then also proc bleeds. It needs to be gun and skill critical hits for that. So this is just a huge pickup. And then we put our last 3 points into Keen Mind. Vex's skill damage gains critical hit chance against any part of enemies. This is going to allow us for our Reapers and our Spectres and all those things just to also proc crits on any part of the body, and anytime they're procking crits, they also have a chance to be procking bleeds. And so that's kind of the whole goal of the build. Obviously, this doesn't take into account gear and like set bonuses or legendary class mods or shields or guns or like anything like that, which makes up probably like 75% of a build. The skill tree is just going to be one aspect of it. But I think this is a really cool foundation. And then obviously, like on our gear and all that, we'd probably look for as much crit chance as we can get, as much status effect chance as we can get, anything that like potentially could spread dots or increase bleed damage, all of those things. But the playstyle of this build would basically be you just running around, constantly summoning your minions, attuning to fire, making sure that you're getting that fire, then swapping to your kinetic shotgun, or it could be a fire shotgun. Who knows? With this game, you could technically get like a fire Jacob shotgun because you roll like a Malawan license part on it. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't actually need to be like a kinetic gun. So that's just. I think this is going to be really cool. I wasn't super interested in playing Vex. I'm going to be totally honest, just because I don't like minion builds. But when you got a bunch of minions applying curses and like getting copies of your guns and proccing tons of dots and all those dots critting, and you're just stacking bleeds, and all of those bleeds are creating more elemental dots, it just sounds really, really cool. So that is going to do it for our first ever theory crafted build. I will have a link down in the description if you want to mouse through it yourself and also make your own builds. Any build that you create is going to go in this community build section. You can look at other people's builds, you can rate them, and obviously these are all just theory crafted, but this is going to all be like available once the game launches, and people will be able to actually like post all of their builds. So if you like this kind of video, let me know. I've got a bunch of other builds that I have made that I'll probably cover in another video if you guys liked this one. But once again, I'm fully aware that it is weird to post like a build Theorycraft this far out from launch. I will catch y'all in the next one, guys. Take care. Peace.